Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Just hope you had a good week and that you found a lot of really interesting stuff in Chapter 7. It's one of my personal favorites, frankly. Uh, so, I want to touch base with you guys about a few things. This is our video update for the week. The first thing I want to say is the discussion forums on Chapter 7 were really, really interesting. Some were not quite what I was looking for, but others were very, very good. You really want to get that idea of applying a principle down as soon as possible because it's going to be really, really relevant coming forward. Your critical thinking papers are on the near horizon, so get your head around what I'm looking for there. Essentially, to apply a principle means to take the options that you've lined up in your analysis section, right, where you identify options for how you might solve a problem. And then once you've got those options laid out, you take the principle from whichever theory it is that you plan to apply, whether it's one of the principles from Kant's deontology, or the difference principle, or the equal liberties principle, the utility principle, and so on. And then you look at each option in turn, given what that principle states for how to judge what's ethical or what's unethical. So, for example, if you take the respect for persons principle from Kant, what you would do is look at your options and determine whether or not any of those options exploit people. That is, to use them as a means only, right? If you're looking at the difference principle, what you're looking for is the option that is to the greatest possible benefit of the least advantaged stakeholders in the scenario. If you're using the equal liberties principle, what you want to do is see whether or not any of those options violate someone's positive or negative rights. And as you're going through that, what I'm looking for you is not just for you to apply it, but for you to explain to me why you think that either violates or is in accordance with whatever principle you pick. So continue to practice that skill. You'll be called upon to do it more later this semester. Some of you did an excellent job on that, were very detailed, and your answers were very deep. Some of your answers were a little bit more shallow. It's really not so much whether you get the principle exactly right that I'm looking for, but the level of reasoning and the detail that you give me. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in the papers. You've had 2 opportunities to practice it, and my standards now get higher as a result. So review that, think about it, and then practice going forward. If you have any questions about that, feel free to drop me a line or come by my office. So, speaking of the critical thinking papers, I want to give you guys a couple pointers. First, I want you guys to remember that this Saturday, February 28th, from 10 to noon, and on the St. Petersburg Gibbs campus, we're having the critical thinking paper workshop. It's a pretty good idea to attend if you can. Most students who've come have found it very, very helpful because I will talk through the model step by step. And that'll give us an opportunity to kind of have a practice run. And a lot of people find that fairly useful. Another thing I want to do as a suggestion, to give you as a suggestion, is this. Don't wait until the last minute to pick your case study. In the critical thinking paper folder, there are 3 case studies, and you must pick one, and that will be the focus that you're going to apply the model to. Right? It doesn't have to be all of them, just pick one case. Focus on that. The earlier you pick your case, the more opportunity you have to study it. The more you read that case, the more you look for detail, the more robust and better your paper will be. What I'm not looking for in these papers is that you're the world's greatest writer or that you're the next Hemingway. What I want to see is how careful you've thought about the problem and how carefully you've applied the model. So in order to get a really good look at the case, I want you to take some time and read the case over and over and over again. The more you read it, the more you'll notice, the more thoughtful your papers will be. So that's a pretty successful, a pretty good hint for a success strategy there, and I urge you all to take me up on that. Get the case study now, start preparing. The papers aren't due for a couple weeks, but the more you've thought about it, the better it's going to be. Do not wait until the last minute. That's a recipe for disaster. I'm looking to see how thoughtful you can be, right? The more thought you put into it, the better off you'll be. I guarantee it. People who try to write these papers at the last minute almost always fail. So get started now, right? Plan ahead, look at your case study, and start thinking about the assignment. And if you have time, come to the workshop this weekend. I'm not saying that to scare you guys. I'm just, from years of experience at looking at these papers, these are the recipes for success. So the last thing I want to talk about with you guys is Chapter 3. I just want to say a little bit about it. It's a radical departure from what we've talked about so far. You've been focusing on critical thinking skills. You've been looking at different kinds of ethical theories and approaches to solving moral problems. Chapter 3 is really about moral psychology, which means it isn't ethics proper. It's not about how you ought to behave or what you ought to do. It takes as its object the way that the human mind works with respect to the fact that we have this capacity to make ethical judgments. It's not clear, and probably not true, that most other animals can do that. It's one of the things that makes us unique, or at least apparently unique, is our ability to make moral judgments. And interestingly, we seem to get better at this over time, right? So we don't start out being ethical geniuses at the beginning. Throughout our lives, we grow, we mature, our understanding of right and wrong becomes more complex, and so does our ethical thinking. So that's something that psychologists would have to explain from just a scientific perspective. And that's really what Chapter 3 is all about, moral psychology. So think about that. And maybe, this isn't part of the assignment, but maybe as this is a little self-reflection tool, think about where you might fall in these categories as far as what these psychologists, Kohlberg and Gilligan particularly, are going to put forward. Standard unit this week, discussion forum, the extra credits in there and so forth. But it's kind of a light unit. You'll find that it's less dense and a little easier to follow than some of the chapters that we've had before. And that's not a bad thing, because right now, really, the papers, be thinking about that as the next big thing. Don't skip the discussion forum. Don't de-emphasize it. But remember that paper's there, and that really ought to be your focus. A few of you have asked me about a midterm study guide. I will provide one for you guys in the near future, but I'm holding off until after the paper's over because that really ought to be your focus. Okay? So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I hope that I'll get to see most of you, if not all of you, on Saturday. I know it's difficult for some folks to arrange, but hopefully I'll meet you then. Have a good week.